Alrighty. Today is my 8-year anniversary here on YouTube. I have been making videos on this channel for the last 8 years. I guess I sort of made some videos on the channel before then. I tried making some like music videos and singing videos and they didn't go particularly well. But 8 years ago is when I made the intention that I was gonna do YouTube and I was going to do it seriously. 8 years is also how much time I spent in medicine. I was at med school at Cambridge University for 6 years, and then I worked as a doctor for 2 years. So like this month, I will have been a YouTuber for longer than I was in the medical profession, which is sort of weird because ever since like the age of like 6, when people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grow up, I would have said I want to be a surgeon or a neurosurgeon or a gastroenterologist or whatever. And now somehow I've ended up with my primary occupation being YouTuber. And I want to try my best to share the kind of life lessons that being on YouTube for 8 years has taught me, so that whatever stage of the thing that you're trying to do you're at, whether you're a creator or an entrepreneur or you're a professional wanting to build a side hustle to get to freedom or like whatever the thing might be, hopefully, fingers crossed, there will be something in this video that is helpful. The first reflection that comes to mind, I didn't have a plan going in. And I don't think you need a plan going in when you're starting something out. There is a line from the poet Rumi, which I really like, which goes to the effect of, when you walk the way will appear. For me, 8 years ago, when I started making YouTube videos, there was no master plan, there was no grand vision, there was no grand narrative around like, I'm gonna end up with like 6 million subscribers and it's gonna be my full-time gig and I'm, all of this stuff. I think had I tried to come up with a grand plan, it would have been a complete myth because like, how could I have possibly predicted where things would go 8 years later? And secondly, if I had tried to come up with a grand plan, if I felt like I needed a grand plan or a grand vision or a grand like architect narrative in order to start the thing, I never would have started the thing. Because it's sort of like when you're embarking on any new adventure, you maybe have a sense of roughly what direction you're trying to go in, but the path is very, very foggy. And in a lot of different things, you really just have to take one step in front of the other. In medicine, the path is actually not very foggy. You know that you're gonna be in med school for 6 years, you know what your salary progression is gonna look like. You can Google how much do doctors make in country X, and you can like literally see the yellow brick road that is laid out in front of you. The scariest part of doing this YouTube thing, and in particular the jump to doing it full time, was that there was no longer a yellow brick road to follow. It feels nice to know what your life is gonna look like 10 years from now. And it is very scary to no longer have that certainty when you are doing something weird, like trying to be a YouTuber or trying to start a business or trying to do something in these non-legible domains where there isn't a clear path to success. So when I speak to people who come to my events or people who are part of my YouTuber Academy, they're often professionals who are in careers that are where there is a clear progression path. There is a yellow brick road that you have to follow. If you want to be a dentist, there's a yellow brick road that you follow. If you want to be an accountant, there's a yellow brick road. If you want to be a management consultant, it's pretty obvious what you have to do. If you want to be an investment banker, pretty obvious. If you want to be a lawyer, it's pretty obvious. And I think a big part of what holds these sorts of people back, like professionals in these sort of high-flying careers, a big part of what holds us back, because I would put myself in that category, is trying to get that level of certainty in a new path. A path like building a YouTube channel or like building a personal brand or like trying to start your own business or starting a side hustle, trying to get to financial freedom or whatever. And in many ways for me, 8 years later, it is still scary. In fact, it's way scarier now than it was 8 years ago when I started. Because when I started my YouTube channel, for the first 3 years of doing it, it was just a side hustle. It was 1 year in my final year of med school and then 2 years working full-time as a doctor. I didn't need the money from the YouTube channel. It was a bonus that I was making money from it after a while. And it was a fun thing I did on the side. But the instant it became my full-time occupation, then all of a sudden it added this pressure to get it right. The pressure to get it right. And the pressure to get it right, that's scary, right? Because it like raises the stakes. It's like, if this YouTube thing doesn't go well, the mind says, I'm gonna end up broke and homeless, kind of thing. Like that's the fear. That's the fear people have. It's like, I don't want to start a business because if it doesn't work, then I will end up homeless. Often most fears lead to, I'm gonna end up homeless or my family will end up homeless and then that would be a bad thing kind of idea. Usually it's I will end up homeless and or people will laugh at me. If you're thinking of like, let's say starting a YouTube channel or starting a business and you feel like you have to get it right, that's gonna stop you from actually getting started because it's so hard to get it right. Like we get so addicted to playing to knowing what the game is and being able to tick the boxes and playing the game, right? Like it's obvious what the game is when you're trying to get into medical school. You've got like the tick boxes that you have to tick And we develop this addiction to the ticking of boxes. And so then when we move into a domain where there aren't really any boxes to tick and it's all like way more foggy and way more fuzzy and like you're not really sure, it's like that desire to get it right and to find the boxes to tick and find the perfect strategy is still there. Which is why when it comes to starting a YouTube channel, so many people are worried like, oh, what's my niche gonna be? I was doing a live session for one of our for our YouTuber Academy students the other day, and we had a lovely lady, and she asked, and she was like, hey, I have all these interests, and I've got like 3 or 4 different niches, and I'm not sure what my niche is gonna be. And I was like, okay, how many videos have you made? She was like, I've made 1 video so far. And I was like, okay, this is something we often say in the course, which is that you're not allowed to use the word niche until you've made at least 7 videos. You gotta start making the videos before you start worrying about the strategy. Strategy is a thing you worry about further down the line, not a thing you worry about at the start. I have met very, very, very few successful YouTubers in my life who started out with a strategy and just executed the strategy. That's just almost never how it works. Usually you start out the thing because you have a vague inkling of the kind of vague direction you might want to go in, and you think it might be kind of fun making videos, and then you keep on doing it and you keep on doing it and you keep on doing it, and through taking action, the strategy and the path becomes clearer. Not through sitting there and thinking about it. We've got to let go of some of this addiction to certainty, because this addiction to certainty, like if I had not let that go, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be still working in medicine, still in the UK, and I'd have way less freedom and flexibility and autonomy over my life than I currently do. Now, if you're enjoying the video so far, I would love to tell you a little bit about WeWork, who are the very kind paid partners of this video. Me and the business have been paying customers of WeWork since 2020. I discovered it during the pandemic, and it was absolutely game-changing because working from the WeWork co-working space in Cambridge, where I was living back in 2020, that was where I really started to feel how incredible it is working with a team in person on this sort of YouTube channel businessy type stuff. Previously, it was just me for the first 2 years doing all the editing and stuff myself, and then it was me and a couple of remote team members. But then Angus, who was one of my team members, happened to be in Cambridge, and so we decided to get a WeWork membership, and we would go there every day and we'd work together in person, and it was absolutely incredible. And since then, as we've expanded the team, we've gotten WeWork all access passes for every single team member. WeWork has hundreds of different locations all around the world, and we have remote team members who sometimes live in different cities and are traveling to different cities who absolutely love working from the local WeWorks. The really cool thing about WeWork for Business as well is that as your business scales or shrinks or scales again or expands and contracts and stuff, you can be very, very flexible with your WeWork workspace. So if you have a dedicated office, for example, you can scale it up or you can scale it down, and it really helps you as a business really adapt to whatever's going on. So back in the day where I had a team of 20 people, we had, a dedicated WeWork membership for everyone. And then as we shrunk things down a little bit after the pandemic, then again, we were just able to essentially adjust our WeWork package as things in the business were changing, compared to the alternative of being stuck into like a 5-year commercial lease if you're trying to rent an office space kind of from scratch. It's very convenient that it's an all-in-one platform as well, so everyone on the team can just use the same WeWork app to log in and access the Wi-Fi from any WeWork in the world, which is just absolutely game-changing. So whether you're an individual or a business, if you're looking for a nice, creative, really nicely designed, vibey workspace, then you should definitely check out WeWork. I absolutely love it. We've been using it for years, and there will be a link in the video description, or you can use the coupon code AliAbdaalWorks10 to get 10% off the all access pass. So thank you WeWork for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. Reflection number 2, basically just get started, and then you have to basically just keep going. 95% of people never take the first step. They never actually get started with the thing they want to do. They never get started with whatever the dream is. And of the 1 to 5% that do, almost no one just keeps going. I don't know what the stats are for YouTube channels, but the stats are for podcasts that I think more than 80% of podcasts have less than 3 episodes recorded, and less than 1% of podcasts have more than 20 episodes recorded. So some amount of people start a podcast. Maybe you've had the idea at some point, hey, it would be cool to start a podcast. Maybe you see people like Stephen Bartlett and Chris Williamson and Mel Robbins, and you're like, man, this is really cool. These guys are making all this money and have all these followers, and all they're doing is just sitting there and having conversations with people. That would be fun. I want to start a podcast. A lot of people will have that thought. Almost no one, in the grand scheme of things, will actually record the first episode. And of the people that do record the first episode, very few of them will make it past episode 3. Almost no one would make it past episode 20. And then almost no one continues making 3 podcast episodes a week for 7 years, which is where my friend Chris Williamson from the Modern Wisdom podcast has been doing the thing. And that's really the game. The game is just get started and just keep going. So the game of just getting started involves lowering the bar and just taking imperfect action, like minimum viable learning, not trying to learn more and think you need more strategy and all of that kind of stuff. All of that just stops you from getting started. And we've just got to get over ourselves and get over all of these emotional hurdles, all of these addictions to certainty to just get started with a thing. But then once you've gotten started, The game is to just keep going. The YouTuber MKBHD did an interview with on the Y Combinator podcast, and they asked him, what's the secret to your success? And he said, well, if you just pick something and do it for a decade, it's hard not to be successful. And I found that incredibly inspiring. I saw that like maybe 1 or 2 years into my YouTube journey. I can't remember exactly when, but I remember thinking at the time that if you just do something for a decade, you are unlikely to go wrong. It's probably gonna work if you just do it for a decade. But no one does it for that long. No one keeps going. There are so many people who started YouTube channels during the pandemic, and how many of them are still going? 5 years later, 4 years later? Basically no one. It's so hard to get started, and it's so hard to just keep going. I've talked a lot about the getting started thing, but I want to talk about the keep going thing, because how do you keep going with something for a long time? And I've only been doing YouTube for 8 years. I'm looking at the people who've been doing it for 13 years, 15 years at this point, and I'm super inspired by them because they've been doing it for twice as long as I have. And I'm like, okay, what are they doing to just keep going with the thing? In order to just keep going, external motivation is not enough. External motivation is something like money. People think that well, if I was making all this money on YouTube, I'd be able to be consistent with it or whatever, whatever the thing is. It's you would think so, but it's actually not about the money. The money serves as a useful, motivating tool in the very early stages of the journey. But then the desire to make more money stops actually being a reliable source of motivation after a while. There is the negative, so the fear of losing money becomes a negative motivator, but that sort of operating based on fear and scarcity often makes people burn out, and that's another big reason as to why they quit. And this is something that I've been struggling with for years at this point. The thing that I have found is actually helpful, is more helpful than money for staying consistent and staying motivated and sort of being able to sustain the journey, is trying to shift it more towards internal motivation. Trying to make the reasons for doing the thing feel aligned with my deeper self, deeper values, all of this sort of stuff. For me, about once every 3 months for the last 5 years, I've had a mini existential crisis with my YouTube channel, thinking, it's all crumbling down. The views aren't the same as they were during the pandemic. And then I speak to my YouTuber friends and they're all like, yeah, everyone had massive views during the pandemic and then they massive drop-offs after that. It's there's comments on the video saying it's like repeating content. What's even the point? I will have that kind of crisis around the YouTube channel about once every 3 months. And usually it takes many hours worth of journaling and thinking about it and speaking to friends about it and speaking to my wife about it and sometimes talking to ChatGPT about it. And all of the conclusions just end up in the same place, which is to realign to the why, realign to the reason why I'm doing the thing. And that reason needs to be deeper than just money in order for the thing to stay sustainable. And for me personally, your mileage may vary on this, but there are 2 things I think about as it relates to alignment, which is 2 C's, connection and contribution. I have those 2 C's in my mind, and I have for a long time, around helping me sustain the motivation to continue with this YouTube thing. Connection in the sense of this YouTube channel is a very nice way to connect with people all around the world, and seeing the comments and seeing the DMs and the emails and people coming up to me in the street and saying, how helpful they found the content and asking questions and attending workshops that we do. That's amazing. I love that sense of connection. That feels very meaningful, and it feels way more meaningful than money. And also contribution. The feeling of imagining a real life person and imagining the video or the content or whatever, helping them in any kind of way. I often find myself doing therapy sessions for fellow YouTubers, even very big YouTubers, because I've now been doing this for a very long time. I was having a chat yesterday with a friend of mine. She is a very big YouTuber, and she was also saying that when she thinks about the money, it sucks the motivation out of the process. But when she thinks about the connection and contribution and the fact that her videos actually seem to have an impact on some people, that is what makes it feel worth it. And I've had similar conversations with my entrepreneur friends who have startups and whatever, and even people with jobs. Generally, a job is much more manageable and a lot more sustainable when it feels like you are doing it for more than just the money. There are so many investment bankers and management consultants I know who are very, very burnt out. They're making really good money. Corporate lawyers as well. They're making amazing money, but they are very burnt out because they don't feel that sense of contribution that their work is actually contributing to. Similarly, though, on the other side of the coin, my friends who are working in medicine in the UK and also in the US, there is a feeling of contribution, which is that you're actually helping people and you can see the help on a daily basis. But there isn't a feeling of autonomy or flexibility. Flexibility mostly. It's if they just had a little bit more flexibility in their careers, that would be a massive source of joy and would make it feel way more sustainable and not burning out and stuff. And there are so many people I know who are sort of way further into medicine than I was, who are thinking of quitting medicine, not because it doesn't have contribution, but because it just doesn't have that just extra sprinkle of flexibility. And this goes to something that Daniel Pink wrote about in his book Drive. So his book Drive talks about the 3 sources of intrinsic motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, i.e. you have control over like potentially what you do, how you do it, like why you do it, all that kind of stuff. You have mastery, i.e. you're working towards something and you're actively learning and improving your skills at the thing. And purpose. You can feel the impact that your work is having. And so when I find myself doing therapy sessions with other YouTubers and other entrepreneurs who are struggling with the keep going thing, like they've gotten started and they're successful, but they're feeling burnt out, they're feeling demotivated and stuff, I can fully relate to those things because, like I said, I have that period of like demotivation about once every 3 months, sometimes more frequently, sometimes a little bit less frequently. And basically what it comes down to, what it always circles back to is intrinsic motivation. Having your own internal reasons for doing the thing. Autonomy, very useful. Mastery, very useful. Purpose, arguably the most important one. Back in the day, when YouTube started, no one was doing it for the money because the YouTube partner program didn't exist. There was no sponsorships, there was no AdSense, any of this sort of stuff. Around 2012, I think, is when YouTube started to become a bit of a money-making scheme. But really in the last 5 years, especially since the pandemic, when people like me started doing videos about how much money you can make on YouTube and this whole like, oh, you can just make money on the internet started to get big, suddenly there's all of these people starting YouTube channels and starting businesses where the only motivation is to just make money. And I get it. I get the motivation of just making money because like in many ways, that's what a job is. A job is a thing that you do, you trade your time for money. And the problem with that is that then you get into this difficulty with the motivation side of things. Because when you're doing it for the money, you only go so far. If you think of your favorite authors, again, they probably didn't do it for the money. Because in order to be an author, like at least, you know, you often have to publish lots of books and like they don't make any money. And then maybe, you know, Brandon Sanderson, his, I think 6th book was the first time he actually got published. And then his 11th book was the first one that actually became successful. And so the people that are doing it for reasons other than money have a sustainability advantage compared to people who are just doing it for the money. And so the kind of note to myself and what I find myself kind of discussing with fellow YouTubers and entrepreneurs in these therapy sessions is it's about reconnecting with why you're doing the thing. Reflection number 3 is finding ways to enjoy the process. This is the whole thesis of my book, Feel Good Productivity, if you haven't read it. If you find a way to enjoy what you're doing, then it just becomes way more sustainable. And there are 2 ways to enjoy what you're doing. Number 1 is do things that are enjoyable. And number 2 is enjoy the things that you're doing. Most people can't just do the things that are enjoyable, right? Like if you have a job, there's gonna be aspects of that job that you don't inherently find enjoyable. In that case, you need to find a way to enjoy them. You need to change your approach to the work so that it becomes actively more enjoyable because enjoyment is efficiency. The enjoyment becomes a source of energy. It improves your productivity, your creativity, it reduces the risk of burnout. This is all the shit that I talk about in the book. But even the most enjoyable things start to feel like work after a while. If you ask kids these days what they want to be when they grow up, like this, the most popular answer is like YouTuber or influencer. Whatever that says about the state of the world. Back in the day, it used to be astronaut or footballer. But being a YouTuber, being an influencer, being an astronaut, being a footballer, these are things that seem fun on the surface. But if you really drill down to what they actually involve, what they involve is a lot of work. In the case of being a YouTuber/influencer, it's a lot of sitting on a computer and trying to figure out what to make content about and dealing with sponsors and sending emails back and forth, etc., etc. And I think the key to the sustainability of anything is to continue to find ways to inject enjoyment into the process. A lot of YouTubers I know quit after a few months to a few years because it stops being fun. But the thing with fun is that it's not just a property of the activity that you can't do anything about, right? Like this mouse is made of like plastic and it makes this kind of sound. That is a intrinsic property of the material. And there's not much I can do about the fact that the mouse is made of plastic other than like burn it to pieces or whatever. But the amount of fun that something is not one of those sort of properties that you can't do anything about. Like I'm sure there's a word for this. There is a lot of impact you can have on how enjoyable a thing might be. If you were to just ask yourself, you know, one of the things I talk about in the book is what would this look like if it were fun? What would the most enjoyable version of this look like? Instead of trying to get it right, what would it look like if you just optimized for enjoyment? Those are the sorts of questions that, again, sound a bit like trite on the surface, but that is genuinely the stuff that helps people keep going. That's genuinely what has helped me stay consistent with this YouTube channel for the last 8 years, because I have kept on finding ways to make it fun. And the problem with those ways is that the same method of making it fun eventually runs its course and stops being fun anymore. Back in the day, for the first 2 years when I was doing my own video editing, I really enjoyed video editing for the first like 2 months. And then I stopped enjoying it. And then I found ways to inject enjoyment into the art of video editing so that I could try it with new animations and this and that. And if you look at if anyone feels like looking at my channel back in the day, pretty much every video I was doing from like 2017 to 2018 had some kind of new editing effect, because I was injecting this sense of progress of like, hey, I'm gonna learn something new each time, was part of what made it fun. But again, there comes a point where there's only so much fancy new stuff you can add to your edit before like you tap out of that source of enjoyment. And so then I had to find other ways to make it enjoyable, and it eventually ended up outsourcing my editing. And so the reflection here is that you've got to keep looking out for more wells of enjoyment. And once the well runs dry, you have to find another one. And ideally you dig multiple wells of enjoyment at the same time, or like, you know, in sequence, so that you never let the enjoyment run dry. Other examples of wells of enjoyment that I found useful is, for example, having an in-person team. Initially, everyone was remote, but then in like 2020, I started working with Angus in person. He happened to be in Cambridge, and I realized like, working with people in person is really, really fun. And I've tried doing remote and stuff. I was doing some digital nomad stuff, and then when I moved to Hong Kong, the team was fully remote. But I realized that actually having a remote team sucks some of the enjoyment out of the process of doing this. And so we kept the remote team, but we hired a handful of people in person as well. And it's expensive hiring people in person. Some entrepreneurs I speak to who love the remote life say that like, oh, you could save money by just hiring people in the Philippines or whatever, and then they're remote and this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, you probably could. In my case, I would be sacrificing enjoyment for the sake of money. And given that enjoyment is what makes the thing sustainable rather than money, I will probably make more money by virtue of the thing being sustainable through the process of enjoying the thing than I will through trying to optimize for like short-term profits or whatever. So it is okay to spend money and to spend time in ways that are not sensible for the sake of your own enjoyment of the craft. Sometimes another well of enjoyment is doing stuff in an under-optimized fashion. So again, what you should do as a YouTuber is you should optimize your titles and thumbnails, and you should only make content that the audience really wants to watch and that the most number of people want to watch. And what that ends up is that in my kind of educational personal development stuff, you end up only making videos about how beginners can make money on the internet without any work. Because those are the videos that get the most views. But if you follow the incentives of the algorithm and the incentives of the views, that also sucks some of the enjoyment out of the process. And I don't know anyone who has just kept on following the sort of the incentives of the algorithm and the incentives of like making numbers go up through audience who's enjoyed that process and has not burned out along the way. So sometimes, in order to enjoy the process, you have to do things in an under-optimized fashion. This video, for example, this video is never going to go viral. It's not going to get as many views as if the title was how to make $10,000 a month the easiest, laziest possible way without any skills and without doing any work, right? Like that's the sort of video that would get 1 million views. This video probably won't get 1 million views. I think it's very unlikely that this video will get 1 million views. This is a very under-optimized video. I have a vague sense of what I want to say. I had a vague sense of what the title was going to be. My team had actually prepared like 8 different videos with titles and thumbnails that I could have filmed today, but I wasn't feeling it. I was like, I don't really feel like any of these titles are currently, in this moment of time, that resonant. But wait a minute, it's 8 years since I started doing YouTube. That would be a fun thing to make a video about. And even though it's going to get less views, the reason I'm making this video is because I think it might be helpful to some people. If you're still at this point, then I hope you're enjoying it so far and maybe finding it helpful. I know that this is the sort of video that I would have wanted to see 5 years ago if I'd seen someone else who'd been on YouTube for 8 years to be like, okay, cool, like what are they thinking? And I know it's not going to get the views, and that is okay, because this is a video that I'm making for the fun and the fulfillment of making this video. Sometimes you got to take a hit on the numbers in order to do it the fun way. And this is hard to do. This is hard to do in industries where the numbers are visible. And even when they're not, to be honest. Let's say you're running a business and no one knows your revenue numbers or anything like that. You know your revenue numbers and you know your profit numbers. And you know that if you're making a product because it lights you up, that might not be the most optimized product you could make. And you will see the impact of that on your balance sheet, on your P&L every single day. You're probably not looking at it every day, but like every month when you look at your management accounts, you're going to see the impact of doing something that felt fun rather than something that maximized the amount of money you could make. And you're going to feel bad about that because you're going to always think that like, but if we'd made product Y instead of product X, we could have made more money. And I've had that decision. I've had that thought process many times. And what I've realized over the years is, yeah, we could have done. But the reason we chose to make product X rather than product Y is because product X is just a bit more interesting. It's just a bit more fun, even if it's less optimized. This gets harder when you are in industries where the numbers are visible. So part of why being a YouTuber is like emotionally taxing is because the numbers are visible to everyone. So anyone can look at my YouTube channel and can glance through the view counts of the videos can glance at my subscriber count, and some people will come to the conclusion that bro has fallen off. They'll scroll back 5 years, they'll see that like, oh, 5 years ago he made a video that got like 5 million views, and he's not made a video that's got 5 million views in a long time. And actually, if you look at the average view count of the last videos, and the reason that stuff hurts is because I think it myself every single day. I think it myself whenever I make decisions that are doing anything other than optimizing for views. Whenever I make a decision to post an under-optimized video, or even when we make the decision to post an optimized video, because you can't really control the view count on a video, right? It's not like it's kind of like a lottery each time. Every single day, the thought that I have is my YouTube channel dying? And I've spoken to so many other massive YouTubers bigger than me. Every single day, they are worried, is my YouTube channel dying? And then when you see a comment to that effect, or like, I don't know, a video with dislikes or what, like that, when it feeds into the narrative of my YouTube channel is dying, makes it even harder to continue doing the thing, because it feeds into your own worry that like, am I gonna end up broke and homeless as a result of pursuing what I enjoy? And every single creative in the world has this problem, like the balance between the craft and the commerce, the balance between the creativity and the commercial incentives. I was watching a couple of documentaries about Robert Pattinson, the actor. And he was in Harry Potter, then he was in Twilight, and these are films that make a lot of money. And then he was like, okay, I don't want to be the Twilight heartthrob anymore. So I'm going to do this random artsy film that's going to make basically no money, but it's going to light me up. It's going to fulfill me. It's going to creatively fulfill me. And then I'll do something big blockbuster like Batman or something. And then I'm going to do another random film that no one's going to have heard of and basically no one will watch outside of a film festival, because that will creatively fulfill me. And I get really inspired by stories like that, because it is someone who could make the decision to make more money, and what they are doing is making a decision instead to optimize for fun and fulfillment rather than finances. And you gotta be okay with leaving money on the table. You just gotta be okay with making less money. And being okay with making less money actually is what makes the thing more enjoyable and more sustainable, because it is very unlikely that the thing that is most fun and enjoyable and interesting and aligned for you is also the thing that makes the most money. It's just vanishingly unlikely that that's actually the case. If that is the case, it will only be the case for a certain period of time, and then the incentives will diverge again. And therefore, you've always got a choice. There is always a choice between, am I doing this for money or am I doing it for fun? The way that I found it helpful over the years to think about this is to really get clear on what am I doing for fun and fulfillment, and what am I doing for money? And the way that I do this is I ask myself the question of, if I had $100 million in the bank, what would I continue doing? What would I start doing? And what would I stop doing? It's like a stop, start, continue kind of mini table. If I had 100 million in the bank, I would not do sponsorships on videos, and I would not do paid online courses. But I would continue to do YouTube videos for free. I'll just chuck everything on YouTube for free. I would still continue to write books. Check out my book if you haven't already, because writing books is fun. And I would still continue to make software. We're making various apps as part of Sparkle Studios, which is my new business that I'm doing with my wife. Some links down below if you want to check out our apps. We've got VoicePal, Superfocus, and a few other things that are coming up. Making YouTube videos, writing books, and making apps is fun, and I'm doing that for fun and fulfillment, not primarily for money. But releasing online courses and doing sponsorships, I'm doing primarily for money. And it's useful to know what things I'm doing for fun and what things I'm doing for money. I'm not saying that you shouldn't never do anything for the money, right? Because if you have revenue goals, or if you have if you want to make some money, you have to do some things for the money. But it's worth knowing what those things are. And then once you've defined what the things are that you're doing for the money, the way I find helpful to think about it is like, okay, cool. Now that I know that I'm doing courses and sponsorships for the money, how can I do those in a way that like minimizes the amount of time I personally spend doing stuff I don't want to do? And how do I maximize the enjoyment? So for courses, for example, I have enjoyed the process of making all of our courses, because I know that like, okay, the reason I'm making this course is because it's good for revenue in the business. Now that I know that, let me put that aside and let me focus on autonomy, mastery, purpose, fun, fulfillment. Like, let me make this course as good as I can be. Let me focus on enjoying the process. Let me really connect to the impact it's having on our students. Let's make sure that like, we're getting good feedback from the students, and like we're using the feedback to make the course better, because there's something inherently enjoyable about making a product better. It's like, when you know what you're doing for the money, you can optimize for fun within that constraint. But when you know what you're doing for fun, you're okay with leaving money on the table, because some things are just enjoyable and interesting rather than things that make the most money. The other question I find myself asking myself, and also other YouTubers who I do these therapy sessions with, is what is the YouTube channel or the business you would like to have once your financial goals are taken care of? And usually that leads to interesting answers, because you then realize that it's like, oh, I could actually just do that now. Like, I don't need to wait for an arbitrary net worth goal in order to do the thing that I actually want to do, if I'm okay with leaving some money on the table. It always comes down to being okay with leaving money on the table. And the happiest people I know, and the ones who are doing this sort of stuff, online business, any kind of business, most sustainably, are the ones who are okay with leaving money on the table. I think this even applies to massive businesses. So there is a story from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. I mean, it's not from him, but it's a story about him, where like he was in a board meeting or something, and he was really keen on making iPhone and Mac like accessible for blind people. Where he was like, you know, they were spending a lot of time and effort and money trying to make accessibility tools so that people who were like blind or partially sighted could still use an iPhone and could still use a Mac. It makes me weirdly emotional to think about this. It's like, I'm surprised by this. But apparently one of the people on the board or something asked like, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment of us making our products accessible for blind people? And apparently Tim Cook just sort of like scolded the guy, being like, bro, come on. Like, the reason we're making products accessible for blind people is not so that it has a good ROI. Like, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. In that context, Tim Cook is recognizing that it is okay to leave money on the table in order to do something that you want to do because you think it might have, you know, it's the right thing to do, it's got impact, fulfillment, fun, like for whatever reason, it is okay to leave money on the table. Generally optimizing for making as much money as possible is a recipe to burn out very quickly. And it's not just money here, it's like money, views, subscribers, like any kind of metric. But money is like the most, you know, the most common one. Optimizing for any kind of metric starts to suck the joy out of the process. And so it becomes this sort of healthy-ish balancing act between doing stuff for the metrics and doing stuff for the fun and the fulfillment. Final point is, you just really never know how things are going to go. I could have had absolutely no idea 8 years ago that this is where my YouTube channel would end up. And when I think about the alternative life I would have had being a doctor right now, and I think about just that decision to start a YouTube channel and how it just completely changed everything. That decision to get started and that decision every day to keep going with it. Even like, especially for the first like 2 years where I wasn't really making any money. It has given me the freedom to be able to basically do whatever I want, whenever I want, not do things that I want to do, work with really cool people, meet really cool people, make a shit ton of money. You know, I wouldn't even have met my wife if it wasn't for the YouTube channel, because we connected because both of us were YouTubers. And I would have had absolutely no idea that that is the stuff that would have happened 8 years ago. A final reflection is something that Jeff Bezos sometimes says. Like, imagine in baseball, the highest number of points you can get is 4, right? Like you could hit a home run or whatever it's called, and you can go around the bases and now you got 4 points, great. But when it comes to business, yes, there's a low percentage likelihood that every shot you take is gonna be successful. But if something is successful, there is no limit to the amount of points you can get. You're not capped at 4 points. If you hit a home run, you could get 1 million points or 1 billion points. And so given that, the only thing you have to lose, like, you have very little to lose by just taking shots on goal. Because if one of those shots works, man, it completely transforms your life. These are not like linear outcomes. These are very asymmetrical outcomes. This YouTube thing is like my 7th attempt at making a business. From the age of 13 up until the age of like 24 when I started my YouTube channel, 23. I had like 8 different businesses that I was trying to run. Most of them completely flopped. One of them sort of was moderately successful and made like 6 figures a year in revenue. And then the YouTube channel started age 23. If I hadn't taken those other 7 shots, those other 7 like swings of the bat, you know, 6 of them were complete strikeouts. One of them got like a double or whatever. But then the YouTube channel has been a home run with 1 million points relative to all the other things. In baseball, it doesn't make sense to just keep taking the shots because all you can get is 4 points. In business, entrepreneurship, it kind of does. You just keep on taking shots until something works. And then when you find the thing that works, you do it for 10 years. And then you look back and you're like, holy frick, like my life is completely transformed. And I think so many people, they don't take the first step because they're afraid of missing the shot. I missed 7 shots before one of them worked. And they don't keep on going because once you find something that works, the game is to keep going with it for at least 10 years. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope that was vaguely useful. And if you enjoyed this and you haven't yet seen my video on how to get rich, which is another similar sort of speak from the heart and share advice that I wish I would have had earlier, then you might like to check out this video over here. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely day. Thank you for 8 years on YouTube, and here's to another 8. Bye.